Hello, everyone. Welcome to Take Charge of Your Health and to another program where we discuss how to achieve optimal health and how to preserve our physical, mental, and spiritual powers. I'm your host, Sose Stojkovic. Today, we're discussing marijuana. I'm in Australia, and I remember when they started selling hemp seeds, there was a warning printed on it saying that you can only use it for animals and in face creams, etc., but not for human consumption. And Australia was among the last countries to legalize hemp food products, and that was due to concerns it can show up in drug tests. Hemp products were eventually legalized in 2017 in Australia, and we seem to now find hemp oil and other hemp products in many of our items: shampoo, face creams, protein powders, clothing, paper, etc. So hemp comes from the same cannabis plant family as marijuana. So they are the same species, but hemp is supposed to contain only trace levels of the psychoactive THC substance, which means we can't get high. And I do believe we can't get high on it because I've tried it myself before. But what does it do to our brain and spirituality in the long term is what we are going to discuss as well. So how did we go from it being illegal to being this all-in-one miracle product? It reminds me of a Bible verse. Matthew 7:17 says, a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. And today we have Dr. John Clark back on our channel, shedding light on these and other questions. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Clark. Thank you for your willingness to share once again.
Good to be here. Thank you, Sosie.
Thank you. It's a blessing for us, of course. So today we're talking about a contentious issue, and that is marijuana. I did a bit of research, and as I said, hemp seeds are supposed to contain only trace amounts of THC. So because it's only trace amounts, do you think it's safe to use then?
Well, people like to minimize, their bad habits and give it a good glow. And, what if it had trace amounts of arsenic? Would that be all right?
That's what I thought as well.
And so and some of it isn't trace amounts either. So we'll get into the actual numbers on some of that. But yeah, if people like it, then they come up with reasons why it's okay.
That's right. And I'm really interested in this topic, excited to explore more, because also I was tempted to think, based on the advertising that came out a couple of years ago, I was tempted to think that maybe I can actually use CBD oil for my sound sensitivity. And I've spoken with you and other doctors as well that spoke against it, and you mentioned as well, and we would like to know more about it, how it works and how is it that it can help with seizures and even the sound sensitivity. So it does affect the brain, but we just want to know how it affects the brain. So looking forward to studying more, and let's start with a word of prayer and get into the discussion. Dear Lord, we thank you very much again for this opportunity to come together and study. We know that you have a health message, and we know that the enemy also has a counterfeit health message, as he does with everything that you you have provided for us every good thing. We want to thank you for our speaker, Dr. Clark, as well. Please be with him and be with us as well. Again, open our ears and hearts that we can receive the instructions that you want to give us. We thank you and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So our title of our discussion here is Marijuana Matters. The brain thing, you need it. I first became acquainted with marijuana on our farm. Were we growing it? No, but we had some interesting people come to work on our farm. They were what in America we call hippies. People back in the generation who were rebelling against societal norms, and they wore long hair and funny clothes and hats and so forth, and drove Volkswagen buses with 5-petal flowers all over them. And anyway, they came to work on our farm, and I was riding with one of them coming from the field with a truckload of wheat headed for our granary. And he started saying, "Well, this truckload of wheat's worth something, but if this truckload was a truckload of marijuana, why, we could retire." And then when I went to academy, it just so happened in the part of the country where that academy was, marijuana, at least some of the wild varieties that weren't quite so strong, I suppose, grew just along roadsides. And so kids would take it and go dry it somewhere and try to use it. My wife, Julie, first started marijuana as a child when her mom gave it to her, and spent quite a few years using it. And then finally, when she became a Christian, or at least an Adventist, the Lord helped her to quit. And so she could tell you quite a few experiences along that line. But marijuana is the parent plant pictured here. And the products, as you've mentioned, that have been put on the market are not only just THC, the psychoactive component of marijuana. It's not the only psychoactive component, but there's quite a few different things in marijuana. But also, then there's CBD, which has become very popular. And then the hemp products, as you mentioned. So let's get into the marijuana thing. And so the reason it was used by teenagers and hippies was for its THC content, which gave relaxation and heightened senses and what they called their high, sort of a way of escaping reality. And there's a lot of things in this marijuana when it gets burned. 2,000 chemical compounds at least have been identified. And what ends up happening is this THC is sort of a fat-soluble substance. And so it gets stored in fat cells. I mean, it can be stored in fat cells for up to 30 days. And where are the fat cells besides, your padding on the outside of you? Your brain is largely fat, so it gets stored there. Your lungs, ovaries, testes, the reproductive organs. And this THC has risen, back in the 60s, 70s and so forth. It was a lower level, but it's been cultivated and selected and who knows what all in order to raise the THC levels. So whereas in the 60s, with the initial hippie movement, it was 1 to 2%. Now it's 10 times that, and so it's stronger and really more damaging. Now people don't just go around the street calling it THC or even marijuana. They have all kinds of street terms for it. Acapulco Gold, which is really a specific plant. BC Bud, Buddha, Chiba Chronic, Dope, which is probably pretty common. Ganji, grass. A lot of them calling it grass. Green Goddess herb, homegrown, hydro, Indo, KGB, killer green bud, kind bud, local weed, Mary Jane, which is really what marijuana means. Shake, Sinsemilla, which is another just a variety, skunk, or wacky tobacco. Those are just some names. I'm sure you could probably think of others. And if you do go to the streets and you do look for it, it comes in a number of different forms, varieties, ways of getting your THC or whatever. And so when you think of it as just the most raw product, it would be um, unprocessed form consisting of leaves, buds of the cannabis plant. Users typically smoke this in a cigarette that they roll themselves, known as a joint, or they have a special pipe, or they might make a bong to collect the smoke and breathe it in. There's more concentrated forms. One would be hashish, or hash for short, and it's a preparation of marijuana made into a resin, and you have it in the pictured form here. Hashish is heated in a pipe, smoked in joints, or mixed with cannabis buds or tobacco, or cooked in foods. People make hashish brownies, hashish cookies, go share them with their teacher to lighten them up. I've heard of people doing that. Anyway, the other stronger forms are to get the actual oil. And this would be like hashish oil, essential oils. So here we go. This one's pretty strong and is the strongest form of marijuana. I mean, it's pretty pure, and is the least common form of the drug available, because it takes, quite a bit of marijuana to make the oil. It is sold in tiny bottles or sealed plastic bags, and only a small amount is needed to produce the same effect as marijuana. Typically, marijuana oil is smoked in a pipe or painted onto cigarettes or joints, or sometimes they'll take and put it into the modern vaping pens, the e-cigarettes, the little nebulizers, and take it that way. There's special dangers to this that we'll get into as we go along when we talk about vaping and this stuff. But as you said, there's a question for a lot of people's minds: what about hemp seeds? And I remember talking to people about hemp seeds and all the benefits of hemp, and what there was, especially in the way of omega-3 versus omega-6 in these seeds. And here we have organic hemp hearts. I think I bought some of these in Australia that look just like that at Aldi, thinking this might be good. And then a little researcher discovered that this product is not well regulated. Yes, it's the hemp seeds, but somebody has the idea that maybe it already had all the THC extracted out of it. Not. It's still there. And so the concentrations of hemp seeds could be as high as 1,250% of the legal limit. I mean, that's like way more THC than is allowed. And in almost all hemp seed samples tested, the THC concentrations were higher than legal limits by at least some margin. And so you're not totally avoiding the THC. Now we're going to get into what the downsides of the THC are here as we go along, because that's one. But there's downsides to the CBD as well. And is the CBD free from THC? Well, there's up to 6.4 milligrams per milliliter of THC detected in 21% of CBD samples tested in one study. That was from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. Many people taking CBD fail urine drug screen tests for THC, and therefore makes them, sort of a poor candidate for getting the job of choice that they wanted. And the CBD not only has effects on the brain, but it affects the liver. CBD causes liver toxicity, results in elevated liver enzymes, especially the transaminases, and increases liver weight. I mean, it causes liver enlargement, which is a bad sign. And there's a lot of issues with the liver. So, yeah, and I'll get back to more on CBD here in a bit. Let's go right into marijuana, because you see it's the most common illicit drug used, especially in the United States. And I say illicit. I don't know how it is around the world or in Australia as far as legal aspects. It's just a mixed bag in the United States. And I'll talk about the legal ramifications when we get into legal issues. But about you know, close to a third of the population have tried it sometime in their lifetime, so it's pretty ubiquitous. And many of them, that's at an early age. And then there's a whole bunch of people dependent upon it, and about 1 million receiving or treatment for marijuana or more these days. And so it's an interesting challenge. Why do people use it? What makes them use it? Well, some of it's medical, right? And it's been touted as a medical benefit and put into doctors' hands, and that's interesting because it still isn't legal for medical use by the federal government, but only by state permissions, which the federal government can always override. But for the average teenager who's picking it up off the street from sources other than medical sources, it's peer pressure. I mean, some people, I know nobody ever offered me marijuana until I was 60 years old. And then we had this guy down the street from us wanted to let everybody know he sells it. Well, he wasn't in my peer group, and so I didn't feel any pressure. But anyway, siblings using it, friends using it, family using it. That's the way my wife started. And they see older people using it, and pretty soon they're using it. There's a lot of it in the culture as far as the music, songs, and so forth that people write it in there. And people believe that if they take it, they can escape home problems, school, and problems with friends. So here I ask the question, where is your tree of life? And the reason I put that here is I'm going to go into some of our church's writings here. To a large extent, Satan has carried out his plans from the beginning to the end. The crime of tobacco using, opium, and drug medication has its origin in perverted knowledge. Where did perverted knowledge come from? It is through plucking and eating of poisonous fruit, through the intricacies of names that the common people do not understand, that thousands and tens of thousands of lives are lost. What is cannabinol? This great knowledge, supposed to be by man to be so wonderful, God did not mean that man should have. They are using the poisonous productions that Satan himself has planted to take the place of the tree of life, whose leaves are for the healing of the nations. When my wife was first convicted on marijuana, some of the thoughts were, well, it's an herb, aren't herbs good for you? Shouldn't we be using herbs? Isn't that part of God's medicine cabinet? It's just another herb. Well, Satan puts herbs out there too, and he puts things in the herbs. That's what we're reading here. And so just because it exists in nature doesn't mean it's good. I mean, how about hemlock? How about, there's poisonous things, all kinds of poisonous things out there that most people won't use or even claim they're natural because they know it'll kill them. And so people are sort of selective about what they claim is natural and want to use. So let's look at cannabinoids. What does the user want? Why do they choose it? What are they looking for? Well, certainly a sense of well-being, relaxation, euphoria, really wanting to escape reality. So they have an altered level of consciousness. Perceptions change. Some are much more intensified. And time seems just to go. And then there's sexual disinhibition. And so, well, where does this stuff go in your head? What's it doing in your brain? What's happening there? Well, it's not quite like eating donuts. It's doing stuff. It's tricking the brain, right? Nucleus accumbens, hippocampus, cerebellum, amygdala, hypothalamus, all get hit with this stuff. And we'll go into these in a little more detail. That's just sort of where we're headed here. And so if we take the modern technology of SPECT scans, where it compares blood flow in the brain to imaging studies and comes out with these models, you can see what the whole brain looks like by a a diagram that shows you where the blood flow is. And this is a pretty normal brain. This person first view is the top of the brain looking down on top of their head. Frontal lobes are to the bottom. The second one is the bottom side of the brain looking up. And there's a couple of questionable areas there, especially back there in the posterior, you can see. But these are views of the brain of a normal brain, and where there is white or the colors, there is blood flow. Where there is black, there's none. And so what would your brain look like on marijuana? Well, here it is on marijuana. Massive spots in the frontal lobes especially. This time the brain is pointed with the frontal lobes up. And where you see those holes, that's because it's imaging where there's no blood flow. What did that? Well, actually, it wasn't the THC. It was the CBD that did that. CBD cuts down blood flow to the brain. And this is why it's become popular, because it just plain shuts off blood flow parts of your brain. So yeah, maybe you don't feel pain or but it's interesting that CBD also is responsible for some of the decrease in reaction times that makes marijuana dangerous to use in driving. CBD changes cerebral blood flow, and that's a problem. And it does slow brain function, and so the way it does it is by decreasing the blood flow. So THC increases brain activation and blood flow. Well, that's why you get these heightened sense of euphoria and so forth. Whereas CBD does the exact opposite, decreases brain activation and blood flow. So do you want your brain's function decreased and its blood flow decreased? Well, some people do. And that's part of the reason that's been used medicinally, and part of the reason why people use it for self-medicating. I mean, and yes, it's also been used for seizures. Well, why does it work for seizures? Wow, you just plain shut the blood flow off to that excited part of the brain, and then it looks like it's dead on, on a scan. Really, most seizure medicines. So if your brain's making waves like this, and the waves get too out of control and you go into seizures, what any seizure medicine does, it just pushes down brain function below the threshold for overactivation. Dumbs you down, shuts your brain off. That's all it. I mean, it's really pathetic. I mean, it's not like it's really high tech. It's just anything. And some of these medications didn't start out as psychological medications or seizure control medications. There was something else, but it shut people's brains down. So yeah, and that's the case with a lot of these antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-seizure medicines. They just basically push the brain function down below the threshold of activation into whatever they're trying to treat, depression and schizophrenia, seizures or whatever. And so CBD does the same thing. So lo and behold, yeah, we'll use it for seizures and for anxiety and whatever. And you're really not doing something super and curing yourself. You're just decreasing brain. I mean, do stones have seizures? No, stones don't have seizures. Well, how about if I make the brain into a stone by shutting everything off with some drug or over-the-counter medication? Wow, stones don't have seizures. So you just fix seizures. But who wants a stone for a brain? Yeah. So brain functions in marijuana. So here's where your brain functional map is. Your conscience is there in the frontal lobes. You see, I have conscience written across the frontal part of the brain there. Right behind that is movement. Behind that is sensation. To the back of the brain is vision. Below conscience is judgment. So between conscience and judgment, that makes up the big part of the frontal part of your brain. What's your conscience? It tells you what's right and wrong. What's your judgment? That's making good decisions based on information on what your sensations are bringing into your brain. And then there's a reward center down there in the middle, and memory, that the hippocampal, the yellow C shape there with the reward memory below it. Okay, So that's brain functions. Notice that that's what I have the caption across the top there. Over across the top of the next section is marijuana effects. Where does it affect? Look for the pink dots. Is the conscience affected? Oh, yes, the conscience is affected. This is why they gave marijuana to everybody, like, places like Woodstock, and everybody became, and the hippies for freedom of expression, sexual expression, whatever. Totally release them. Notice it affects sensations, it affects motor movement, and it isn't a positive effect on motor movement. Doesn't make you more coordinated. And then notice the visual isn't affected that much, but the coordination down there at the bottom with the cerebellum. And yes, memory is affected. See, you got a big, massive amount of effect surrounding the original light yellow hippocampal area, and then reward center. And what would this look like on post-mortem on dead brains, on people's brain? Well, here we're going to compare clear over on the right-hand side of normal brain. Notice the amygdala is pointed out. Remember, the amygdala was one of those areas that THC or marijuana especially affects. Then you look at the brain on marijuana, and the amygdala is gone. Yes, that lack of blood flow, but remember, it was CBD that usually made the blood flow go away. The whole lack of blood flow or the change in the brain is dramatic. I mean, it's just like that part of my brain no longer exists. And so we're looking at a serious problem here. So what do cannabinoids do in the amygdala? Well, what does the amygdala do? It's about registry of novelty. You ever met somebody that's high on drugs and everything seems to be exciting and new to them? I remember meeting a young, when I was just out of my teens, and this guy came and he was wanting to get a job in our shop, and everything was just new and exciting to him. And yeah, he was way out there on drugs. Determination of emotional relevance. They get excited about things they shouldn't get excited about. Forgetting of adverse memories. I should remember that when I took this stuff last time, I got myself in trouble, but I don't remember that. Regulation of appetites. So yeah, you'll see here when we go along that changes the appetite. Regulation of pain threshold. And that would be a whole discussion in and of itself. And regulation of anxiety and fear. And then global characteristics of consciousness. All there in the amygdala that we just saw disappear when people used cannabinoids, cannabinol, THC. What are some other problems caused by marijuana? It impairs motor control. And we saw that in that brain, didn't we? And then it slows reaction time. That's why you're more likely to have accidents. As we've traveled around the country, there's been a lot more billboards put up by government agencies saying, if you're on marijuana, it's going to be the same type of legal problem for you as drinking alcohol, and people on marijuana have just as many type accidents. It's because of the slowed reaction time, and of course motor control issues, short-term memory loss, and visual impairment, and warp time sense, increased heart rate, heart starts pounding faster, and it actually kills neurons and demyelinates them. It's like taking the insulation off the wires, and then the wires don't work very good. Decreases blood sugar levels. Well, this wouldn't be your favorite diabetes medicine, would it? Well, it is for some people. Anxiety, panic reactions, totally disordered reactions to outside stimuli, lung problems, particularly if it's smoked or vaped, and dilated pupils, red eyes, and that's pretty classic. See the picture above? Red eyes, and a weak immune system. We'll touch on this here, but yes, CBD does mess with your immune system, and THC. So then there's appetite stimulation. So munchies, people tend to gain weight on this. Well, I don't have a good appetite anyway. Maybe everybody starts smoking that stuff. Well, you don't want to do that. So is CBD good for me? Data overwhelmingly shows that CBD is immunosuppressive by direct suppression of the activation of immune cells. I didn't write that. I just took that straight out of the article read, down below there. Infections are over 30% more common in those receiving CBD. This is just, yeah, the CBD. Among infections, viral and pneumonia had the highest relative increases. The article went on to talk about, well, the name of the article was Cannabinol as Prophylaxis for SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. Unfounded claims versus potential risk of medications during the pandemic. And this was 2021. And so they were going into how this is not your friend if you want to survive COVID. Well, so how does marijuana compare to tobacco? Well, it's still being smoked, still has toxins, and it's much more carcinogenic actually than cigarettes. It leaves a lot more tar in the lungs than the cigarettes do, and it causes a lot of respiratory problems, bronchitis, chronic cough, uh, wheezing, and it affects the heart, increases heart rate. So there's a lot of things that go on with it, just a lot like tobacco, and yet some things it's worse. And long-term effects are definitely a problem. I mean, we get long-term effects because most people started this pretty young, and then the risk of cancer goes way up. I mean, my wife's mother was a chronic marijuana user and died of lung cancer, and 50% to 70% more carcinogenic than tobacco smoke. The daily use of 1 to 3 marijuana joints is the same as 5 times as many cigarettes. So much 5 times more carcinogenic. Yeah. And so, yes, reaction times are slowed. And so, yes, there's more problems with accidents and people using marijuana. And if you just smoke one joint, you have a 41% reduction in reaction time. And so much more likely to get in an accident. 2 joints, it's up to 63%. And drivers with marijuana in their blood are twice as likely to be in a fatal car crash. Maybe not them, but the driver of the other car. And so this is a big issue. And then there's the whole thing about stroke. So if it affects your blood pressure, if it affects other things, it definitely affects your brain. Then young adults with recent marijuana use showed an 80% higher risk of stroke. Young adults compared to non-users. And frequent marijuana users, that is more than 10 days out of a month, showed a 145% higher risk of stroke. And people get addicted to this. Yes, they get addicted. We mentioned earlier that 1 million people were in treatment for addiction on marijuana in America. Raises levels of dopamine. That's the addiction. Anything that raises dopamine tends to be addictive. And it can be a very intense raise in dopamine. And it can wear off pretty fast. You kind of crash. So you're scrambling to get another one on board and take it. And so people get addicted to this dopamine release, intense pleasurable feelings. Now, the following are signs of addiction. How do I know if I'm addicted or not? Well, if you're using more than you intended to, I mean, I'm already out of it. I thought I had 5 bags here. Oh no, I guess I've been using too much. Trying but failing to quit using marijuana. That's a biggie. Spending a lot of time using marijuana, craving it, using it even though it causes problems at home or in relationships and social situations. Or with your, you quit doing activities with friends and family in favor of just sitting around and smoking. Using marijuana in high-risk situations, such as while driving a car or on a date. Continuing the use of marijuana despite physical and psychological problems, needing to use more marijuana to get the same high, and experiencing withdrawal symptoms when stopping marijuana use. Those are all signs of addiction. And what are the physical consequences? I mean, well, it's not good for reproductive organs. Remember, we said it's fat soluble and gets stuck in the brain and in reproductive, the ovaries and testes. So it reduces sperm count. Maybe nature's probably trying to save the world from having more, THC devotees. I don't know. But anyway, you won't have babies as often. And for females, it raises their testosterone. What happens to a woman that gets high testosterone? Well, she can grow a mustache, changes in voice, aggressive, things like that. Now, a lot of people, they don't stop with marijuana. And by stop, I mean they go on to other substances of abuse, other psychoactive substances. Marijuana, tobacco, alcohol are all considered gateway drugs in that if you use those, pretty soon you'll probably be using something more dangerous and more addictive. Speed, heroin, cocaine, PCP, things like that. And or stronger marijuana products, hashish, hash oil, that kind of thing. So this doesn't mean every person will do this, but a high percentage do. So it's affecting your brain. Now, where did we start learning about marijuana? Who ever figured out that this plant was like this? Well, see, there's a long history of religious groups using this. You see, like many mind-altering plants, cannabis has been part of spiritual practices for thousands of years. It has deep roots in Hinduism, for example, Islam, Rastafarianism, and indigenous traditions in Asia, Africa, Animus, and elsewhere. And why do they use it? What's the point? Well, a lot of these religions depend upon the drug to shut down the frontal lobes so that the powers of the universe can get into their soul. I mean, the devil can possess them. And so it really opens them up. A lot of religions use this. A lot of spiritualistic religions use drugs in order to achieve this kind of result. It's really turning off the frontal lobes so that things can be slipped into your subconscious or into your sensory experience without you discriminating against them. And so your frontal lobe, when it's dysfunctional, then you have more impulsivity, less determination between what's right and wrong and what is best for your future. And so this is, so it's a part of religious experiences. You remember peyote and the North American Indians, and I forget if the Aboriginals have any such things, but probably you get over into the islands and you get people using betel nut and that kind of thing. So so if it's doing all these things to the brain, what are the long-term effects for the brain? High risk of schizophrenia. Yeah, we had a friend out there in Australia who was on all kinds of drugs for schizophrenia, and it was from his use of cannabis, smoking marijuana over the years. And so if people at age 18 are using it more than 50 times in their lifetime, risk of schizophrenia goes up pretty dramatically. And not just schizophrenia, how about bipolar? Yeah, so there's a lot of things that go wrong with the brain when you're using these psychoactive substances. Now, I said that the other way people take this is by vaping, and vaping, even more than smoking, damages the lungs and has really difficult or ill effects on the body. Eval, E-V-A-L-I, e-cigarette or vaping use associated with lung illness. L-I is lung illness. V-A is vaping. E is for e-cigarettes. That's sort of their acronym in their literature now. So people with lung damage from vaping typically have symptoms that start a few days to a few weeks before they go to see the doctor. And they might be going to see the doctor in an ambulance. All people hospitalized develop some type of breathing problems, but many people also have other symptoms. The symptoms reported by those who have gotten sick are coughing, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, vomiting, stomach pains. There's been deaths, and that's why it's hit the literature, hit the news. Diarrhea, fatigue, fever and chills, tachycardia, that's a fast heart rate. Tachypnea, which is a fast breathing rate, usually shallow breathing. And so it's a sort of a bad sign when you start getting these after vaping. And people who get this can, yeah, die rather quickly. Well, okay, I don't want to use it anymore. What do I do? Well, I've been using it every day, you might be saying, and I got to get off of this stuff. And what's going to happen? And if I quit using it, will I survive? And so let's talk about withdrawal, the symptoms. So 10 hours after you quit, using it, then you'll start getting symptoms. They might last, 5 days, maybe a little more. There'll definitely be anxiety, fear, apprehension, worry that the world's going to fly apart, mental clouding, but brain fuzziness, mental fuzziness, hard time thinking, insomnia for sure, can't sleep, anorexia, all of a sudden you don't feel like eating, whereas before you had the munchies, irritability, don't have that drug to keep you, copacetic, tremors, that's pretty big. People get pretty shaky. Depression, headache, craving. Gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. Very similar to nicotine withdrawal, except for nicotine withdrawal, you tend to go the opposite on the eating. When you smoke, you eat less, and when you don't smoke, then all of a sudden you got the munchies. Whereas with marijuana, when you smoke it, you get the munchies, and when you quit, you quit wanting to eat. And so, quitting and detecting use. THC half-life in plasma or urine is somewhere between 20 to 60 hours. Elimination half-life is 5 to 6 days. Half of it's gone in 6 days. Another half is gone in 12 days. Another half is gone in like 18 days, right? So this is a big deal. It's going to be around for a while. And there's things that can help you get that reduced. Using charcoal can help get it out of your system faster. Chronic user may still be detectable for a month, like, in urine and so forth. And so what happens is as you quit using it, it starts coming out of your fat stores. Whereas if you're using it every day, you sort of maxed out your fat stores. Now that you've quit, it starts coming out, and it binds to lipoproteins. What are lipoproteins? LDL, HDL, VLDL, all those cholesterol moieties. The human organs that contain the most fat, and therefore the most THC, are the brain, reproductive organs, ovaries, and testes. Boy, doesn't that seem somewhat suspicious or conspiratorial that it ends up in such important organs in the body? What's that tell you? Not only does it have spiritual implications for use with spiritual exercises, but the devil puts it in places that he wants to kill no matter what. Well, what about people who've smoked it most of their lives? What is their life history like? I mean, is this going to make you a candidate for being a Nobel Prize winner? You're going to be a mathematician? Well, the more marijuana you use at ages 14 to 21, the lower level of degree attainment you'll have by age 25. Probably won't go to college, is what it's saying. You have lower income at age 25, probably working an hourly job. Higher levels of welfare dependence. You're getting on the dole more commonly. Higher unemployment. You just can't hold down a job. Lower levels of relationship satisfaction. Using people like you use drugs. Lower levels of life satisfaction, and higher suicide rates. So that's significant. Don't kill yourself over this one. And so, what about the young person's brain? If they use it regularly, what does it do? Well, definitely poor academic performance. Much more likely to have attention deficit problems and difficulty with information processing. Just can't concentrate, can't get the concept that the teacher's trying to teach, and can't remember. What about if I get pregnant and I'm on this stuff? Yeah, okay, reminds me of working at the county hospital delivering babies from drug addicts that didn't hardly know they were pregnant. Well, so associations have been found between marijuana use during pregnancy and increased risk for miscarriages. more likely to lose the baby. Future development of hyperactive disorders in the children. Much more likely to have a stillbirth, about 2.3 times greater risk of the baby dying. So yeah, you're killing the baby by smoking this stuff during pregnancy. Altered responses to visual stimuli, increased trembling, and a high-pitched cry in the baby, which could indicate neurological development issues in the babies. Increased gaps in problem solving, memory, and ability to remain attentive in school for children. So it affects the baby a lot. THC accumulates in the human breast milk and has high concentrations in the developing brain. And especially if you're using THC during the first month of life, you're going to end up with motor development issues. And at 1 year of age, why isn't my baby walking yet? Well, now let's talk about other issues. Male cancer risk. It increases testicular germ cell tumors. And my wife was talking about some of the people they used to smoke marijuana with having this diagnosis come up. And okay, well, let's get into some legal aspects, at least in America. I know we're talking here. I'm not sure what the legal aspects are in Australia. But in America, it's against the federal law. Marijuana is illegal. You might be thinking, Dr. Clark, aren't you behind? I thought it was legal everywhere. Well, we have this interesting dichotomy. The governments aren't all on the same page. I mean, the different levels of the government. And whereas, yes, some states have put it on their rule books that it's okay to use, the federal government really overrides the states, and it still is on the books in federal governments that, no, you're not supposed to use this stuff. And if you are caught using it, there's big problems. And so how can it be used as medicine while it is illegal? Well, maybe because a lot of those government officials used it themselves. I don't know. It's craziness, but it's been a controlled substance since 1970. Meaning it's illegal to use it without special licensing. And it's considered a Schedule I drug. There's no higher restriction put on any drug than being a Schedule I, basically. No current accepted medical use. This is federal law. No legal distinction between medical and recreational use. You've got it in your system, you're in trouble. Doesn't matter where you came up with it or who told you to use it. And up to 1 year in federal prison, a $100,000 fine for first possession offense, up to 5 years in federal prison, and $250,000 fine for first manufacturing offense. So, pretty stiff. Okay, how about medical marijuana? Well, in 2001, the Supreme Court ruled that there was, no excuse for breaking federal law. There's no medical necessity for this. And the FDA affirmed smoked marijuana is not considered a medicine in 2006. I'm leading up to something here in going over all this law. And so Supreme Court ruled that federal marijuana laws have precedent over state laws. It's just the feds don't have that many, people running around looking for this kind of thing. And if the state isn't looking for them, then it sort of gets swept under the carpets. Can be charged with federal marijuana violations even if obeying state regulations. Case would have to go through federal authorities, and it's pretty rare, but it does happen. A friend of mine sent me a YouTube video the other day, and it was a recent policeman stopping a car going 90 miles an hour, which is a bit fast. Now we're talking quite a few kilometers per hour to go 90 miles per hour. Probably over 150 kilometers per hour. And so pulled the person over. I mean, this is all on chest cam. I mean, the policeman's wearing a camera and published what he found onto YouTube. But anyway, he goes up to the door of the car, opens the door, And the person comes out, and he takes the person back to his cop car, his police car. But then he tells the person, "You are, I am not only just a policeman, but I'm a Homeland Security officer, and therefore I'm under federal law. And when I opened the door of your car, I smelled marijuana. So therefore, I have rights under federal law to search your person, your car, your possessions, and just reading your rights." And so he proceeded to search the car and found things. So, yeah, it does happen, and that's a case of it happening. So Supreme Court ruled that federal government cannot investigate physicians just because they recommend marijuana. So the physicians aren't getting in trouble for this, but you could be. So smoking marijuana is unlawful. It is, some countries it isn't, some countries it is, and but I'm making a case you don't want to use it even if it is lawful. But here I'm going to talk about the lawfulness of it, because in America anyway, if you're doing something that is illegal, you really come under Romans 13, right? The possession and use of marijuana is sinful because it is against the law, according to Romans 13. Because the law is there to help keep you, on the straight path, to keep you out of trouble. And the use of marijuana is intrinsically sinful. It is condemned as a lust of the flesh in terms of sorcery, found in Galatians 5:20. How so? Well, the Greek word for sorcery there is pharmakia, medication, magic, sorcery, witchcraft. And so using mind-altering substances that are often used for witchcraft, as we pointed out earlier, or for devil worship or spiritualism, is certainly not going to bring you points in the kingdom of God. Those who practice these things will not inherit the kingdom of God, according to verse 21. And this is in direct contradistinction to verses 23 and following, where we have the fruits of the Spirit, which include temperance or self-control. And so when you use this, you sort of go out of control, right? It takes you over. And this is what 1 Corinthians 6:12 and 13 will bring us to. All things are lawful for me, says Paul, but not all things are helpful. King James says not all things are expedient or a good idea. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So when you smoke the stuff, when you take the stuff, when you vape the stuff, when you eat the stuff, when it's in your system, you're under its power, especially your frontal lobes, where you're supposed to perceive God. The real perception of God is not helped by this. The false perception of God in spiritualistic religions is helped by this, because they want to shut down your frontal lobes. Reading on verse 13 there, foods for the stomach and the stomach for foods, but God will destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for sexual immorality, but the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So a Christian should never lose control by use of recreational drugs. That is not part of the plan. And our bodies, aren't our bodies the temple? Know ye not that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. Really, you probably destroy yourself. Anyway, the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. We are the temple of God, and smoking the stuff is not helpful. Now I want to touch on another text, and that's 1 Peter 3:15 and 16. And but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope that's in you with meekness and fear. What might compromise your ability to give somebody an answer, a reason for your faith in meekness of fear? Reading on, having a good conscience, that when they defame you as evildoers, those who revile your good conduct in Christ may be ashamed. Will they be ashamed if you were an evildoer and you are using marijuana, and they can point it out? Look, he's nothing but a pothead. Don't listen to him. You don't have to see what he says in his Bible, because he's a lawbreaker. You will not be considered a good person. You'll be considered an evildoer, and you'll be ashamed if this is the way. I mean, you look at the politicians in the United States, and some of them had smoked marijuana when they were kids, and it came up in the in the campaign debates. And yeah, it wasn't considered a good thing. Okay, so I've got this whole history of, maybe you're saying you have a whole history of using marijuana. What do I do about it? How do I deal with it? Well, you got to manage the withdrawals, right? You've decided to go through the withdrawals. Now you got to manage the withdrawals. How do we do that? Well, exercise is excellent. It gets your endorphins up. What are endorphins? Natural good feel hormones that you get when you exercise. It helps your circulation to improve. Yes, to even parts of your brain. It helps you to be able to sweat out toxins associated with the cannabis. There's a lot of benefits to exercise in recovery. And it gives you something to do besides fingering your leftover joints and wondering whether you should light one or not. It gets you preoccupied. Then there's water. You drink more water, you sweat out more toxins. You drink more water, it washes more out through your urine. You drink more water, it helps the cells to get refreshed. Then there's green leafy vegetables. Why green leafy vegetables? They're very high in nutrients. When you've been using marijuana, you probably haven't been eating well, and your body's behind on good nutrition, and that will set you up to crave all kinds of stuff. And so lots of green leafies, potassium broth stew. You can look that up on the internet. Basically making a stew of vegetables and using it because it's got lots of potassium in it. Very good for withdrawals. Lots of fresh fruits and vegetables because they're high nutrient dense foods. We'll make sure you don't have any other cravings to have to deal with at the time. Hydrotherapy. What's hydrotherapy? Well, usually hot and cold treatments such as hot and cold showers. Another very good one is the heating sheet pack or wet sheet pack. And because you definitely sweat out toxins either from marijuana or tobacco or whatever you got in your system. Avoid gathering with a crowd that's passing the joint around. That's not where you want to be. You don't want to be in the line and be tempted. Seek support. Find people who've also overcome it and can be helpful for you. And eliminate other addictive drugs. Remember we talked about other gateway drugs? So alcohol and tobacco can be a gateway to marijuana. Caffeine can be a gateway to marijuana. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding those other drugs. There's some herbs that will be helpful. If you have an insomnia, then there's valerian root or chamomile or magnesium oil, which you put on your skin. There's things that can help with inflammation like turmeric. Very good for that. Low appetite, which you might have. Ginger root tea. Very good tea. If you're getting depressed, maybe ashwagandha or St. John's wort. They're a little slow to start acting, but they will do their job in time. Anxiety, again, ashwagandha is favored here. And what are the long-term effects as you come off of it? Or what can you help with the long-term treating effects? You want to start learning new things, stimulate that brain. Here's a gentleman, he's got his Bible out there and a book to write down things. Eat brain foods. What are brain foods? Things like nuts and seeds, especially walnuts and pecans and black walnuts, soybeans, lima beans, corn, peppers, all these foods that are considered good brain foods. And you can do head hydrotherapy. Or you can do whole body hydrotherapy. Morning cool sponge bath where you scrub your skin real well with cool water. It's very good for getting your nerves going, getting you over withdrawals. Hot and cold showers invigorate your brain circulation. And then hot and cold head treatments, which I mentioned in the last slide. And just like with our talk on Alzheimer's, what we're doing here is we typically put like a hot pack on the forehead and a cold pack behind the head on the top of the neck and up of the occiput back part of the head. And do that for 3 minutes and then switch them. Cold to the front, hot to the back. 3 minutes. What this does, you keep going back and forth. What this does is it improves the circulation through your brain. Why do I want to do that? Because you got an amygdala that's almost dead. So you want to get the blood flowing back to it. You got a bunch of parts of your brain that don't have good blood flow because of the CBD. And so you want to get those going with good blood flow. And so the hot and cold treatments are there to improve blood flow to the brain. In conclusion, smoking marijuana is against the law of the land. As such, those who possess it and use it are considered by God to be evildoers. Smoking marijuana is an intoxicant like alcohol. Wise individuals will realize its destructive nature and submit as servants to Christ, maintaining purity in the body. Smoking marijuana is destructive to Christian influence. And as we pointed out, smoking marijuana fits in the category of sin, especially related to allowing something else to control you and doing things that are illegal. All right, I think we've come to the end of this, and so I'll take this slide down so I can go back to the, there we go, very good.
Okay. Wonderful. Really good information, Dr. Clark. Thank you so much for that. We are blessed, of course, with your insight and with your research. And yeah, we just want to remind everyone that we have a bit of time to ask questions. How much time do we have, Dr. Clark, to ask some questions to you as they come in?
Yeah, I'm not too short on time, so whatever comes in, we'll
Okay.
just play it by ear.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I did really like the multidimensional information, like I said, that you presented. I just wanted to ask you, Dr. Clark. So when you say in America it's illegal, so can you use hemp seeds, or that's also prohibited?
Well, so what would get you in trouble is if you failed a urine test. And so the hemp seeds could help you fail a urine test. Some of those CBD products, as we said, were high in THC as well, and that would get you to fail a urine test. And so that could get you in trouble. So I might just give a little more social background. You know, we spent time in Colorado. Colorado legalized supposedly, you know, marijuana back in 20, what was it? I don't know, 2012. And I mean, it was a disaster because everybody came moving to Colorado to get their, you know, legal marijuana. And so the number of street people increased, the number of people that are out of work, you know, unemployable and unemployed increased. And it just, the result was not a happy effect for Colorado. And there's been whole articles and research done on that. And so, yeah, so when they legalized, and again, they legalized it there and everybody moved there, but that didn't change the federal laws. And so they could still be caught. Yeah, it just so happens that the federal government just probably doesn't have a great deal of interest in it. What they'd be looking for is growers and importers, you know, drug trafficking, and some of the other illegal things associated with that.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering, I guess, if so some parts of the plant are illegal, it seems like, even in Australia. I don't think you can just smoke marijuana. But so the seeds then, is it wishful thinking to think that we can legalize only hemp seeds, but the hemp seeds come from the plant, and to just think that the other parts of the plant are going to be discarded and only hemp seeds are going to be used? Not that we want to use hemp seeds, but let's say they were, according to research I have, apparently it doesn't show up in drug tests, which you're saying that that's not even the case. So is that wishful thinking to think that people are not going to smoke and they're just going to get rid of, you know, 90% of the plant and just use the seeds?
It's a good question. I might just clarify here. There's quite a number of different marijuana varieties, and also related plants. Hemp probably is not what people are smoking on, you know, recreationally or whatever. It just is a related plant that is high, still has, you know, detectable or more than just detectable high levels of THC. If you actually
Mm-hmm.
had marijuana seeds, that is part of, you know, these um, buds that they smoke. If you had real marijuana seeds, they would be higher in THC. But we're just
Yeah.
looking at a product here that's too high in THC for somebody who wants to have a good brain and think clear and do what God wants them to do.
Mm-hmm. Because it's supposed to have about 0.3% of the total dry weight. Apparently, the THC, which is, as we said, is not supposed to make you high, but you were saying it still affects the frontal lobe, and especially the does that still affect the amygdala as well? Did you say that the THC affects the amygdala as well, or that was the CBD component?
That's a good question. Most of the literature talks about that it's the CBD that is affecting the blood flow. Now,
Did you?
whether there's other reasons why the amygdala burns out other than just loss of blood flow, I'm not exactly sure.
Mm,
It definitely, you know, anatomically, as you saw on those slides, it just plain degenerates. And that could be done by blood flow stop, but there might be other toxic effects of marijuana also contributing to that. But I would have to do more research to see that for sure.
yeah.
Mechanism.
Okay. Yes, but we are saying that we probably should be, should be away from the hemp seeds as well, right? Because you were saying the amount is actually higher than what they claim.
Yeah, what they claim and what the government allows. I mean, it's when
Mm.
we were there in Australia, we saw those for sale at like Aldi's, and we got a bag of them, and then we tried them. And it's like, let's just study this out. And so when we were there, we studied it out and found out that it would have, you know, high levels of THC, and so we threw out some bags of hemp seed.
Mm. I had to do that as well because I mentioned to you before that I was using it to make milk for my little one, and that's also because it was based on my research. It's supposed to be complete protein, and it's supposed to be like easily digested for little ones. And when I say little one, I mean 7-8 months old, when you start kind of steering a little bit away or reducing the breast milk. And so, yeah, I had to get rid of the rest of, the bulk seeds that I got so that I have good stash of hemp seeds for milk. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea. If we find out that it's not something we should be using, then just get rid of it.
Yeah, yeah, be willing to throw it out.
Yeah. And I'm also wondering, Dr. Clark, in some countries it is illegal, other countries it is legal. And like I said, in Australia up until 2017, it was, I guess, illegal, you can say, to use for human consumption, the hemp seeds. So then what was the research back then that is not the case now? What is it that, like, new information that they discovered that, oh, now it's okay to use, but only a few years ago it was not okay to use? Because right now I don't find any research anymore that speaks negatively about it. So I guess that can be confusing for a lot of people that want to know where do we get the research from, the correct information.
Personally, I think that a lot of this changing of rules is based on, well, a number of things. Probably Timothy O'Leary and World Peace Through Drugs, and also public demand, and then, what we call the money trail. And so I think that's been a big driving factor. I don't think it's necessarily that people decided this stuff was just wonderful for food and we were missing out on something. I think the driving forces have come from less than perhaps honorable sectors or honorable reasons. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I'm not thinking that and then here's what happens too. People like something, and so they go to the ends of the earth to find reasons why it's healthy. Red wine, chocolate, apple cider
Mm.
vinegar, you name it. And they come up with why this stuff is not just only not bad for you, but it's a health tonic. And I think that, marijuana has gone that way. CBD has gone that way. Now we got hemp, hemp too, and making milk out of it, like you say. And so I think it's driven from beneath, not from above, and the result is that people get snookered into using. I've had people come in my office, old ladies. Well, Dr. Clark, I now drink a cup of wine a day because I've been told I need to for my heart's sake. I usually don't drink it. I wouldn't drink it otherwise, but now I'm drinking it just for my heart's sake. It's like,
You poor thing.
yeah, yeah, poor thing.
Just for the heart's sake. Yeah, no, exactly. And there are actually studies that show that the active component in the wine is also resveratrol. It's in the grape skin. So I wonder why we don't put ourselves through the same trouble and eat the grapes instead of
Yeah,
drinking the wine, right?
yeah, no, that's it. And yeah, like you say, it's in the grape skin, and probably isn't a lot of the skin in the wine, but you eat the grapes, you get the skin, and you get more of that resveratrol. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said before as well that any green thing can have some benefits, right? So it's just weighing out what the benefits are against what the side effects are going to be. And the same thing, the cacao. And you mentioned spiritual uses of cannabis, and that's incredible because even cacao started off like that, right? It was used to enhance the spiritual experience. And even now, they've got ceremonial grade cacao. And I asked someone one time, I'm like, do you know why it's called ceremonial grade? Because they were used in ceremonies. So again, not something that we should use to enhance our spiritual experience, right?
Yeah, so the active component in chocolate is the theobromine, and that's the one that is theo meaning God, bromine meaning food of the gods. So,
Wow.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but it makes sense. Wow. So we do have some questions, and one of the questions Jenny is asking, please discuss creatine that is used for pain relief. Do you have any comments on that, Dr. Clark? Or
No, is Kratom a certain brand of CBD or something? I've never heard of Kratom.
yeah, if you can give us a little bit more information, Jenny, about that, maybe we can discuss more. Okay, so we have another viewer. Veronica says, "No wonder these seeds made my stomach hurt." That's, I guess, that's one of the side effects to let you know you should probably stay away from them. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay. What about kava? Is it okay to use?
Kava is another psychoactive substance. And I haven't done any programs on it or done a lot of research on it, but I did look into it a little bit when it was said that it could be used for a plant or a product to help get you off marijuana. And so when I looked at it, I thought, this is not a good trade-off because it's got its own problems. I can't give you a lot of details as to its long-term bad effects, but it's not going to be a good choice in switching off of marijuana. It's better to stick with good things. What are good things? Oh, spinach, cauliflower, herbs like broccoli. Like we said, dark green leafy vegetables is a good way of getting off of marijuana.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Thank you for that. And you also mentioned, I was about to ask you this question, Dr. Clark, but you did mention then in that case, in case of ADHD, anxiety, or similar similar issues, what we can use. And you did mention one of those things was ashwagandha and chamomile and valerian, right?
Yes.
We can safely use for any of those issues.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, on the CBD, there's a lot of studies out there. I mean, there's thousands of studies. It's become very popular. And why has it become very popular? Well, usually why it becomes very popular is either somebody selling it is getting enough money so they can support research, or number two, the people who are doing the research love this product and want to see it spread to other people, or otherwise, there's a push from somebody to increase the production of this product in the agricultural area. But I was looking at that because they one of the claims is it increases cognition, it improves brain function. Well, the studies show it slows down brain function, but it might make it a little more acute. But then when we looked at that, there was articles that showed that yes, there might be a little improvement, but it's just like coffee in that the improvements don't last over time, perhaps, and that over time it becomes so that you have to take it just to reach baseline again. That if you don't take it, you deteriorate. So they were giving it to kids, gave it to a kid, the kid improved in their brain function, but when they stopped, their brain function dropped below what it had been before they started. So the doctors were putting the kid permanently on CBD. Well, that's not a great thing because you're dependent on this drug and that's what it is with coffee users. Once they become addicted to it, or once they become dependent on it, they merely take the coffee merely returns them to the baseline they started at before they ever took it. So that's sort of an important caveat to think about on the CBD.
That's true. Yeah, you did mention CBD was suppressing brain function, and that I guess explains why seizures stop, because I have heard, and again, you're tempted to believe that that's exactly how it is and it will help your brain. But there was a doctor I was listening to, he said, we are taught to lie with facts. So you can mention the facts, but you're still lying. It does help with seizures, but like you said, it can turn your brain into a stone. And does it help really? That's the question.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And
we might. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you said it kills neurons as well. So like alcohol.
Yeah. Sure does.
Yeah. So what were you about to say, Dr. Clark? Sorry.
Let's see, the CBD, and so another group was doing driving tests, and the driving tests included how long do you stay in your lane, or how often do you go out of your lane, what is your reaction times, what is your likelihood to be in more accidents, and all those with CBD increased. In other words, they were out driving outside their lane more often if they're on CBD. They're more likely to have accidents, and the reaction time slowed. All on CBD. So CBD is not a wonderful thing, whereas THC is the total enemy.
Yes. And yeah, it is really good. And we have a talk coming up with Dr. Jade Erasmus as well on CBD and overall the cannabis family plants, the marijuana family plants. And yeah, she's got also some like experiences with clients, and I also actually know people who have used CBD and they would not recommend it, especially if your brain already is inclined to having let's say is not that healthy already. I think it can set you up for having hallucinations and everything, and that's all I can say, because it's not my information, it's personal information. So I do know people who can definitely say that they have used it and they would now just stay away from it as much as possible.
Yes,
And
one of my big red flags was the fact that it turns off blood flow to your frontal lobes, where your conscience is, where your higher thinking is, and you know, it's like, well, there it is, plain as a picture in front of you. This thing's going to give you troubles.
yes, exactly. And you were doing another talk, Dr. Clark, and I've taken the quote from there, and this is from Ellen White, Prophets and Kings, page 212. I just want to mention the quote, that it may, like we were saying, it may have benefits as well, some benefits, but she says, those who give themselves up to the sorcery of Satan may boast of great benefit received, but does this prove their course to be wise or safe? What if life should be prolonged? What if temporal gain should be secured? Will it pay in the end to have disregarded the will of God? All such apparent gain will prove at last an irrevocable loss. We cannot with impunity break down a single barrier which God has erected to guard his people from Satan's power. And you were talking also in that presentation, you were talking about the Witch of Endor. So it's probably like a Witch of Endor type of moment. Is there no God in Israel, that we have to go to what the enemy has sown? If we consider this is probably the enemy has done it.
Yeah, you know, you don't find medications in the Bible per se. There's nowhere it says, you know, Jesus didn't say, put this in your mouth and in a couple of days you'll be all better. You know, take an aspirin and call me in the morning. It just wasn't that way. It's like, yes, there were salves. Wounds were emoliated in some kind of salve. There was the apothecary's ointment. There was what we call, well, like the figs were made into a poultice and put on Hezekiah's boil. But there's not, it's not like the Bible was full of people taking things by mouth and getting better. This has become, or any magic potion. And that's what we've come to these days, is people want a magic potion. And I do a whole talk on sickness being a call to self-examination. Most people take sickness as being a reason to call the doctor and get some magic potion. But really, you have to look at the disease and say, why did I get this? And Jesus often told people, well, you know, sin no more. So what they'd done was a sin that caused their disease, lest something worse come upon you. And so a lot of these magic potions have become false gospels, so we don't have to face the reality of cause and effect and what we've done to ourselves.
Absolutely. And we are encouraging everyone to do their research and find out even why the research indicates that some things are safe, because the same research goes for coffee and chocolate. We need to see why. These are, you know, huge industries, and chocolate and coffee, these things are just used for Valentine and for Christmas and all of these things. So we should see where, like you said, you know, follow the money. A lot of the times that's where it comes from. So we want to thank you a lot, Dr. Clark, once again for, you know, coming on the channel and sharing your insight and experience. I just wanted to ask you, is there any information on this in your book, The Blueprint for Health and Healing, or just in your presentations?
Give me just a minute here. Sorry, let me just take a look. I can't remember if we put that in. Did we put in a chapter on marijuana in the book? I got the book here. I'll just...
Yeah, I don't believe there is a chapter. I just didn't know if there is anywhere that's mentioned. You have the cocoa romance, I think, in the book.
Yep, yep. No, I don't have no chapter on marijuana in there. Right.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this is a lot of my stuff I start out with as a talk, and then once I've you know, improved it, then it'll get to condense down into a chapter eventually. And this one is still in the talk stage. In fact, for this particular rendition of it, we added about 5 to 8 slides that weren't in the previous presentation, so it grows.
Yeah, that's right. Information keeps coming. But there are other really good topics on it, ADHD and the cocoa romance, Alzheimer's, you know, health and spirituality, which is all still connected with what we are talking about. So our next presentation, which will be next Sunday for us, again, 10 o'clock, is going to be on hydrotherapy. Is that correct?
That's right. That would be good.
Yes, so we encourage
And so
everyone to join again.
hydrotherapy is sort of the mainstay of medical missionary work, of treating people naturally. It's one of what we call the 8 natural doctors, and there's a lot of different things that if you treat them with hydrotherapy will respond. That in conjunction with the other 8 natural, you know, the other 7 natural doctors, as we call them, or 7 other remedies. And so we'll be talking about the use of water, not just drinking it, but using it for hot and cold treatments, as we mentioned here, for withdrawals, certain hot and cold treatments. We'll go through those in detail, why they work, what's happening when you use the hot water and the cold water, and perhaps there's a few situations and stories of where we've used it and seen benefit.
Wonderful. And like you said, you did talk a little bit about it, but we are looking forward to finding out more. So we will do that. And we will just ask you to have a prayer for us, please, Dr. Clark, before we close.
Yes, I'd be most happy to. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for your leading in our lives, that you've given us good information in your word. You've supplied us with good bodies. You've bought us with a price. Therefore, we're supposed to glorify you and our bodies. Lord, we pray that we'll always be seeking to find out what best pleases you, what's best for our bodies, what's best for our brains, what's best for our spirituality, and avoid those things that are detrimental and take those things that are good in moderation, and that we can always be your children and growing in your grace. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again, Dr. Clark. God bless you, and we will see you next time.
Okay, God bless you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. We want to remind you that our next presentation will be, again, Australian Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. next Sunday, and we will be discussing hydrotherapy. Remember, like I mentioned, we have a presentation coming up with Dr. Jade Erasmus, and she will also be talking about cannabis and marijuana and her experience as well with working with people, and also her inside experience and knowledge. And we want to thank you again for supporting our ministry. You can check out the description box if you want to find out more information about our ministry. And also visit Dr. Clark's ministry website, which is ref14.com. If you have any questions for us and for our guest speakers, please email them to us at takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com. And as we said before, we never had so little time in which to do so much. So please share, subscribe to our channel, and share the good news with everyone else as well. So thank you again. God bless, and see you next time.